we're live. Great. Okay. Hey, folks, it's Friday, August 15th, 2025. So it's time for another edition of Dangerous with Coffee. The reason I call this show Dangerous with Coffee is because the more coffee I drink, the more I wake up. It's part of this great awakening that we're all now involved in, and we've all been learning and seeing things over the last couple of years, especially, that caused us to realize what has really been going on in our world. We start to see the world the way it really is, all the digitized illusions that we've been fed, that we've been programmed to believe, they suddenly start to fade away, and we begin to see the world as it really is. And this causes us to understand better not only what is happening now and what we need to do in the future, but it also causes us to look back into the past and reassess the things that we were told. And one by one, we begin to reassess the institutions that are around us and how they came to be, how they came into existence, and what their actual purpose is. One of the best examples of this, I have my good friend Colonel Roxanne Towner Watkins, who's been covering Operation Gladio and what the CIA really is, not what they tell you it is, what it really is. Since the end of what was created at the end of World War II, what do they actually use the CIA for? And one thing that you come to learn, that Roxanne does a brilliant job of discussing this and researching this and explaining it to her audience. And she's on Rumble, the Colonel's Corner. You should all go follow her if you aren't, by the way. What she explains is it's the CIA is not really an intelligence agency. Time and time again, you find them farming out actual intelligence matters to other people, other agencies like the FBI. So they don't seem to really do any real intelligence work. What they do is they send in agents provocateurs, or they form paramilitary forces that go in, destabilize a region, start a conflict, cause a conflict. Then they use their CIA analysts to say, hey, somebody better go in and calm that right down. And so then that's where the military industrial complex gets involved. CIA starts the fires, military industrial complex, we're talking massive defense contractors, the think tanks in DC, foreign policy establishment. We'll go put that fire out and everybody makes their money. Thank you, CIA. Good job there. And they've been doing this since the end of World War II. Well, as Colonel Towner explains, they were doing this before World War II. The end of World War II was where they merely, the oligarchs' own entities stopped paying for this themselves. They had the people they controlled and the Washington government create the CIA so they could get the American taxpayers to start paying for this. And they have, man. We paid for this up the ass for about, ever since the end of World War II, about 80, 85 years. Yeah. At any rate, Great Awakening leads you to go back and reassess things. And this morning, what I thought I would do, in light of the fact that despite all of their efforts, despite all the resources they devoted to it, to try to stop something like this from happening, Donald Trump is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin today in Alaska. This was never supposed to happen. You got to keep that in mind. Trump is supposed to be gone now. supposed to be gone by now. The script these people were writing seriously after he surprised them in 2016, the main script they've been writing for world events to follow basically had to do with getting rid of this guy and getting one of their own people back in there so they can get things back to normal, okay? And they mostly got that with Biden. So then they put a lot of effort, time, effort, resources, sweat, tear, prayers, the barrel, okay, into stopping Donald Trump from coming back, and he came back anyway. And today, he has a really real shot putting an end to this 3-year conflict going on, 3.5-year conflict currently going on between Russia and the globalist cult proxy state of Ukraine. So what I want to revisit today is, what is this foreign policy establishment? It's just not the politicians in Washington D.C. and the foreign policy think tanks in the they call it the Acela Corridor, Maryland, Virginia, D.C. It's not just that. International. We have an international foreign policy establishment, Trilateral Commission, the Atlantic Council on Foreign Relations. These people they've spent over 130 something years right now building up these oligarchs families now, these globalist oligarchs families, established, funded, created, and they control a foreign policy establishment. And I wrote a series of columns last year when Trump was in the thick of his campaign. He was coming back, and I would turn on the news, and there it would be, some foreign policy diplomat, international, ambassador or whatever. There's a lot of people involved in this foreign policy establishment. It's very big. Okay, I turned on the TV, in June, July, just before that assassination attempt in Butler, and there would be some foreign policy establishment person, Pompeo, whoever, Bolton, talking about it would be a disaster to put that freaking dumbass back in the White House so he could start screwing up everything again. For the adults, for the adults in the room. We do not want to send the adults out of the room again and put this lunatic back in charge. So I was seeing a lot of that during the campaign last year, and it inspired me to write a 3-part column series that I'm going to be reminding you of some things about just how badly the foreign policy establishment has done at maintaining actual peace and promoting peace over the last 130 years. Just since the 1900s, and possibly just before World War I broke out. What kind of a job has the foreign policy establishment done at keeping and establishing peace? Because after all, how do these people describe themselves? They are the foreign policy wonks of peace. Their job is to keep the peace, promote the peace. So we're going to be looking at their track record this morning. So let me go ahead and bring this column up. By the way, I hope you all subscribe to my Substack. You can see the URL up there, briancates.substack.com. And this is in my archive. Every column I've written there since late 2021 is available to read for free. And all the videos I've been doing lately, like this one that you're watching right now, you can watch all of this stuff for free. There's no charge for any of this. I support myself by people who voluntarily buy a subscription for like $5 a month. That's how I'm able to do what I do full time, because I have enough people that are supporting me so I can do it. So I don't have to go get a real job. Okay. Let's take a look at the column. Okay, this was written back on October 24th of 2023. So this is like, not quite 2 years ago. When Trump was still being opposed by all, not just the foreign policy establishment, you had all the uniparty GOP swamp people, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis, and all these other people on the GOP field contesting him for that nomination. And one of the biggest things that would hit him was, oh my God, it would be better to put any of these other people, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, any of them would do a better job handling foreign policy than that freaking guy. So, October 24, yeah, keep that in mind as I go over this. This is from almost 2 years ago. Trump the warmonger versus the foreign policy wonks of peace, part 1. Remember when the entire international globalist foreign policy establishment told you this whopper with one smothering voice, and just how false it turned out to be? Remember when Donald J. Trump became president by the end of his first year in office from January 2017 to January 2018? Two of the supposedly biggest generational and existential threats in the world we're facing had already become quickly fading memories. Of course, I'm talking about North Korea and ISIS. You'll have to stop for just a minute and think hard to recall that when Trump was running for president, and right after he moved his family into the White House, we were all treated to months of endless storm underground about how Trump was supposedly going to blow up the entire world. Yeah, take this idiot seriously as a foreign policy expert in dealing with North Korea and Middle Eastern terror threats like ISIS? Come on, man. Everybody knew he was going to be a massive foreign policy disaster because he didn't listen to foreign policy experts like all his predecessors did. So we were endlessly told he couldn't be taken seriously as a candidate for the top executive office in the world because he would create incredibly unstable foreign policy due to his being an arrogant, clueless alpha male and an all-around idiot blowhard. Then, after he shocked them all by winning that election anyway, despite their loudly warning the public about what an idiot he supposedly was, they stridently yelled all the more during Trump's first year in office that he was making all the wrong moves. He was causing the world to be a far more dangerous place than it had to be because he refused to listen to all the same globalist foreign policy experts that Obama and Biden and Bush and the Clintons and Jimmy Carter and all these other guys, they all listened to the experts. Trump wasn't going to do that. He made it clear he wasn't going to do that. So you remember the foreign policy experts, right? The same Council on Foreign Relations, the Atlantic Council, Trilateral Commission type people that former presidents are all surrounded themselves with. They listened to policies they implemented and what all that expert foreign policy resulted in. Well, yeah, let's discuss that for a minute. Well, okay, several minutes. This column is going to be much longer than my usual. And it is. It's probably one of the best. This series is probably one of the best, some of the best columns I've ever done in over 12, 15 years of being a columnist or a column writer. So let's discuss that for a minute. How was it that the ogreish and ignorant Trump's immediate predecessor, who the foreign policy establishment just loved to death and admired so much that they bestowed a Nobel Peace Prize upon him before he even done much of anything? How was it that guy was unable to make any progress during 2 terms in the White House when it came to both North Korea and the ISIS terrorist group? Well, here's the caption I put here for Obama. I'd like to take just a moment and bask in my own awesomeness as I accept this Nobel Peace Prize, as I prepare to set the entire Middle East on fire while bringing the world to the edge of nuclear war with North Korea. Yeah, they did that. They gave him a Nobel Peace Prize. He hadn't even done shit yet. So, President Barack Hussein, I love Iran, Obama, or as I like to describe him lately, our former gay, faggot, Muslim Brotherhood president, he not only pulled off an increasingly stupid act of pretending to be helpless from 2012 to 2016 in the face of ISIS, a bunch of oath-bound terrorists gallivanting around Syria and Iraq in slow-moving armored convoys. He was also simultaneously pantomiming utter futility in dealing with North Korea and Kim Jong-un's increasingly unhinged nuclear threats. Well, supposedly they were coming from Kim Jong-un. And I got 2 pictures here of Obama and his wonderful, sophisticated, nuanced, trilateral commission, Council on Foreign Relations expert advice that he got and his implementation of that advice. I'm sorry, folks. Kim appears to be impervious to my awesome foreign policy nuance. And then when it came to ISIS, I'm sorry, folks, but ISIS is here to stay, and I can't seem to do anything to destroy them. At best, all I can do is contain them, kind of, slightly, contain them within the area that they've ludicrously managed to seize and hold for the last 4 years. Obama and the entrenched foreign policy establishment convinced the international public that both of these crises were modern-day Gordian knots, that they were intractable problems with very complex issues that required a stable and educated foreign policy hand to deal with them. And Obama, being the best and brightest, spent his 8 years in the executive office impotently wringing his hands as both threats in the Korean Peninsula and in the Middle East grew larger and larger and larger in the public mind thanks to your endless fake news media coverage that kept the public's attention laser focused on them as being very real existential threats. Now, if a man anointed as a foreign policy expert who understood all the nuances involved in dealing with the North Korean ISIS just could not get anywhere and make any real progress against them, what were the chances of a simpleton like Donald Trump getting it done if the American public made the major and tragic error in judgment of handing Trump the awesome responsibility of dealing with these crises? Yeah. Now, think back to how this transition was being covered at the time. The highly intelligent and nuanced Obama was handing off dealing with North Korea's nuclear threat and ISIS's reign of terror to an idiot who was going to end up blowing the whole world up after provoking several wars. That's the constant framing of this that we got from the fake news media. And then even the neocon news media was framing it that way. Mike Pompeo. Yeah, that's just who I want to hear from. On the Trump meeting with Putin today, I want to hear from Mike Pompeo. As we all know, Obama was such an intelligent and nuanced expert in foreign policy that he ended up firing the one intelligence agency he had who wouldn't parrot back to him the same happy talk he wanted to hear about his fabulous Middle Eastern foreign policy. How nuanced and sophisticated was that foreign policy? Remember, they actually said in official State Department communications you were no longer allowed to say terrorist groups. He had to say man-caused events or man-caused disasters. Some nuance there. The picture of Obama with General Michael Flynn. Guess who was telling Obama from 2009 to 2014 that he had ISIS in the Middle East all wrong and got fired for telling him that. So disastrously dumb foreign policy, which ended up setting the region ablaze and a massive wave of terror and bloodshed after that Arab Spring that Obama so eagerly took credit for. It's got a message from somebody. Okay, it's my brother. Can you activate closed captioning? Let me check that out real quick. I didn't know. I actually did not know I could do that. Okay, being active, I can start the closed captioning. I don't know. I think you have to do that before you go live. I'm not sure how to do that. Sorry. I will explore that issue at a later time. So, getting back to the column. Remember how that crack foreign policy establishment burbled and cooed about how awesome Obama was after he single-handedly launched that Arab Spring all by his lonesome by giving a speech in Cairo? Yeah, Cairo, Egypt. That's the claim. Hey, he came, he made a speech, and freedom and protests, peaceful democratic protests just broke out all over the region. Wow, that was amazing. I would consider that one reason they innocently talked up Obama's supposed prescient role in foreseeing or even causing the Arab Spring was that they'd already handed old jug ears a Nobel Peace Prize. They were belatedly trying to justify having done that. So Obama gave the speech in Cairo in 2009. By 2011, the Arab Spring had commenced, in which Obama managed to successfully walk the tightrope of taking full credit for this emerging Arab Spring while simultaneously ensuring no real freedom or democracy made any gains in the region. I gotta tell you, that was not easy to do, but Obama managed to accomplish it. So while all these people are protesting in Iran, the Green Revolution breaks out. People protesting and asking for democracy in Egypt and places like that. Obama's taking credit for having started this, but if you were watching at the time and knew what he was doing, you could see he was not making any moves to actually make any democracy happen in that region. In fact, he was opposing it. He wouldn't lift a finger to actually help any of the democracy protests. So, and I have in the on the website here on my Substack column, here is Obama giving comments on the Arab Spring, taking credit for it. So at the same time, Obama was basking in the acclaim for having started the Arab Spring at the United Nations in September of 2012. His and Hillary Clinton's failed foreign policy moves in Iran, Palestine, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, and most especially Egypt and Libya were already starting to bear their awful fruit. The Benghazi crisis, in which 50 plus Americans were essentially abandoned by the Obama administration for hours, while under a highly coordinated terrorist attack and only a seat of the pants evacuation performed on the fly with lots of luck limited the fallout to only 4 American deaths. The Benghazi attack merely previewed how all of Obama's second term ended up being centered on stridently attempting to avoid any responsibility for the increasing destabilization of the Middle East. Obama and certain people spent the entire first term gathering the wood, pouring the gasoline, deciding, which terrorist group they're gonna support over here, who they're gonna destabilize over there, Operation Patio shit, doing all this. And that was towards the end of that first term. They started lighting the matches. The second term was all Alabama saying, I can't do it. I'm sorry. I can't do anything. I can't stop any of this. Sorry. That was his job. Start the fires, get out of the way, let people make the money. Here, of course, are the 4 deaths at Benghazi I just talked about. Chris Stevens and a guy's name I don't remember, Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty. I'm sorry I cannot remember that young man's name to borrow me his name. I can't remember his name. Um, I'll have to make a sensitive comment now. Because Benghazi is one of the things that when I talk about a great awakening. And we start to understand now how right now the illusions fade away, the mirage evaporates. Start to see how the world's really being run. We start to look back, we have to reassess certain events about what the CIA was actually doing in Benghazi, where ISIS actually came from. Well, CIA, agents and officials and State Department people and Obama administration people and members of what role they play in this, okay? And I understand that a lot of people are always gonna view these guys as heroes. And, hey, maybe they didn't have a full picture. Maybe they didn't really know. Hey, we're helping a globalist cult run by a bunch of oligarch families create a new terrorist threat. They're preparing to unleash it. They created it, they're funding it, and we're taking part in the arming of it. We're running the weapons to it, okay? And then unleash it on the Middle East, and they're gonna protect it and shield it like those around kill a couple dozen thousand, I say 70,000, 100,000, whatever. How many people ISIS killed while Obama was president? And we're playing a minor nuts and bolts role in this by arming the terrorist group in Benghazi. When you first find out what they were actually doing there, what the CIA was actually doing, what no name, that no name asshole, what it's a bitter pill to swallow, and the one consolation is so much of this stuff is compartmentalized. A lot of people further down the chain, they're given orders. The orders are not explained to them. They're not told why they're being told to do this. Okay, so there's plausible deniability for the people at the top. The contractors that are brought in, to provide security, they don't know anything about, the big 40,000 foot big picture being what the compromised people in our government is doing. They're creating a new telescope. Al Qaeda's too degraded now. We need a new threat. Keep the money going. Keep the global war machine turning on. And so ISIS is the new cult. ISIS is it. Okay, Al Qaeda is out. ISIS is going to be it. And that's what Gaddafi was all about. It went south on them, and one of these groups put it up or whatever, and they decided they were going to attack the CIA people at Benghazi. That's when it went down, and of course, we all know how Obama and Hillary responded to that. So, as Obama and Hillary utterly abandoned Libya in the face of the Benghazi debacle, and then compounded that by literally handing Egypt over to the Muslim Brotherhood. And both countries descended into complete chaos and destruction. The terrorist group that Obama had repeatedly and snidely dismissed as the Daisy thing was somehow allowed to seize almost half of Syria and one-third of Iraq. I use the word allowed very deliberately. People were talked into accepting the idea. See, this is how they program you. It never occurred to you at the time while you're watching this, if you're not awake, that all these expensive, highly paid news anchors, all these networks are being fed and to talk propaganda talking points, and their job is to not alarm you and make you think what you're seeing has a rational explanation. They can't really show you what's actually happening. Explain this in a second. A lot of people still haven't figured out what ISIS was. They still haven't figured out how ISIS was able to pull off this amazing feat for about 5, 6 years. I was around the area and seize all that territory and hold it, not just seize it, hold it. Okay. Wow, because you have serious people, Tom Brokaw, all these people, that guy just got probably left through hope, and all these people talking seriously. ISIS seized new territory, interacted, and they're very serious because if you really understood how the war worked, your bullshit detector would be going bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. A lot of people, it's learned to them, it's presented to them in a way that they can't, okay, yeah, fine. I just go, wow, somebody needs to stop those guys. It's amazing how nobody can stop them. And you just buy in to the narrative, you buy into that plan. The people were just talked into accepting the idea that in a region where every country has a fully functioning air force, slow moving convoys, black flag waving ISIS terrorists, be simply unstoppable as they also very slowly traveled up and down those highways and byways from city to city, from town to town, committing mass execution and seizing and holding major American territory. We have like just one of the mass executions that ISIS carried out, or to be more accurate, one of the mass executions carried out by a first world paramilitary force created, funded, directed, and controlled and armed by our CIA and cleverly disguised as a bunch of radical Islamic terrorists. So Obama dithered and mumbled for 4 years how he couldn't get any type of a coalition together. He couldn't get any help in the region. No organized military response. The Arab nations the nations that are under direct threat from these guys, somehow they can't get together and form a coherent or effective response. The world wow, and amazing as ISIS was allowed to seize a staggering amount of territory. A brutal band of world warrior type terrorists with no effort, no effort whatsoever, completely oath-bound to slowly be guys in trouble. This was framed to you as if it made any sense whatsoever. It was framed to you as if this made sense. Okay. Here's where ISIS was by January 2015, when probably you could say that ISIS was at its height. This is as big as it ever got right here in 2015 at the height of their powers. And you can see I said, not, well, okay, they probably had about a third of Syria and about just under 1/4 of Iraq. Okay, that's the high tide that they had. They held some of these places for years, for years. They took it and they held it. And this was framed to people that yeah, they were trying so hard to stop these guys, and just can't stop them. Sorry. So, along with Obama and Hillary and John Kerry, the globalist foreign policy establishment all came out and posed for the cameras of the fake news that the oligarchs also control, and they run their hands together. Oh, it's so sad. Wrung their hands publicly for the cameras as they professed their utter and complete impotence in the face of the ISIS threat. But it didn't have to be this way. Obama and Clinton were making all the wrong moves from 2009 to 2014, alienating U.S. key allies in the region while ignoring growing threats. Someone had been trying to get their attention, calling for them to reverse the direction that they were sailing the U.S. foreign policy ship in. And at the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, General Michael Flynn had been using everything but signal flags trying to get Obama and Clinton's attention and explain to them why the foreign policy being enacted was not only naive and wrong, but also incredibly dangerous. Now, when you don't know about the globalist cult or you don't believe in one, and you don't accept the idea that there is an international intelligence conglomerate, that all the intelligence agencies are owned by the oligarchs cult, a series of oligarchs families that are all incredibly super wealthy, and they run a lot of things around the world. They run about 24 Western countries. They've gotten control over the last 100 years. They bought out the political class. They control the political class. They control the media class. They control the academic class. They have control of the military. Okay, they control all of this. And so here's an honest guy trying to tell globalist cult members, to people who owe their higher loyalty to the globalist cult, he's trying to explain to them, the foreign policy you're following, I don't understand it. All it does is it destabilizes everything. And yeah, if you don't know about the globalist culture, you don't believe it exists. You think these people are just making a bad decision here. They mean well, but they're just making a bad decision. Yeah, you can try, you can waste a lot of your time trying to explain to them, that they need to change what they're doing. But the fact is, just as with everything else these globalist cultists do, like when they rig the elections in a city like Washington, D.C., and they make sure that they control the mayor and the police department and all the local authorities. And then they put a Soros DA in charge there. okay, and they go to no cash bail, and they start they literally deliberately break the criminal justice system in that city. And for years, people in the neocon, the other half of this now, the neocon fake news media, it's like, you know, they're just incompetent. They're all crazy. They're lunatics. They're mind. They just don't understand truth. They're brainwashed. They're crazy. That's not it. That's part of the game. Part of the game. They know what they're doing. It's all deliberate. But neocon news tries to sell you. They mean well. They're just incompetent. All these people are dying in D.C., being shot and robbed and raped and killed, and all this drugs are being sold, and all this trafficking's going on because these people are they're corrupt, but the idea is somehow thought that this isn't deliberate. This isn't deliberate policy to destabilize the city. Okay. They would be killing their fellow Americans. Obviously, they can't be doing that. Oh, is that what you think? So there's this attitude, and this is the framing about General Flynn. Before I really woke up all the way, he's over there waving his arms, trying to get their attention, trying to explain. Look, Obama, look, Hillary, I know you mean well, but the policies you're following are getting people killed. It's dangerous. You need to stop and change course. And given what we know now, that was incredibly naive, because everything these people were doing was absolutely 100% deliberate. They wanted to destabilize the Middle East. They wanted terrorist groups running around there, killing a whole bunch of people in very inflammatory ways, in very public ways, so the cameras could capture it, and it could be beamed back to the United States. People would say, okay, Al-Qaeda's gone now. We got about 15 years out of Al-Qaeda because of 9/11, but there is a new emerging threat in the region, and we gotta go deal with it. We have to. We can't contain it with the resources already there. We must have more resources. We must commit more resources to the region. No, not that. I don't mean doing an arms deal with the local militaries in the region so they can guarantee their own security. Shit, we don't make enough money from that. No, I mean we need more of our resources in the region so our defense contractors and our think tank, foreign policy people can make their money. That's what I mean. So trying to do that was a constant upstream swim for Flynn, as he was surrounded by civilian and military law and intelligence agencies that were becoming increasingly politicized by an administration that was hell-bent on ignoring very real threats while focusing on achieving Pyrrhic and illusionary victories against small or non-existent threats. So Flynn seemed to have gotten Obama's undivided attention by the spring of 2014, which is when Flynn was informed his services as the head of the DIA were no longer required, and that Obama was firing him and replacing him with someone who would not be quite so problematic for the administration's directions and goals. Here's a report from Insider Business Daily, or whatever that site is, about the U.S. military's top spy being forced out, dated April 13, 2014. So, the fatal consequences of Obama's nuanced foreign policy in the Middle East. Waves of dead people in Iran, Egypt, Syria, and Libya. And at the time, before a lot of us woke up, including me, very well read, followed the news, followed these events when they were happening. But I got the coverage of the events through the fake news. And I look back now and I realize I bought into a lot of the fake framing that was going on. So this is why a column like this is important, because I know there are a lot of people out there that have not gone back and revisited this yet. This will not be an exhaustive postmortem on the abject foreign policy failures of the 8 years Barack Obama was in the White House. I need a full-length book for that. I'm really going to be hitting the high points while focusing on the Middle East and North Korea. All the dumb shit Obama did in Cuba, Mexico, Central South America, and Southeast Asia would have to be skipped for the time being. So, betraying the Green Revolution. The most amazing thing for me as Obama was siding with the mullahs in Tehran and refusing even token rhetorical support for the Iranian People's Green Revolution was the started and panicked way that Obama and his two secretaries of state, Hillary Clinton and then John Kerry, repeatedly insisted for the media that they were most certainly not betraying the Iranian people, while they were in the process of betraying the Iranian people. Obama could only muster tepid criticism of the mullahs after they turned their vicious Republican guard thugs loose on the Green Movement protesters, making examples such as Nita Sultan, her murder caught on camera as she was shot down in the street. Just a target picked at random, send a message. We're still in charge, and you need to stop protesting and go home before this happens to you. I'll never forget the first time I watched that video maybe 3 times, and I can never bring myself to watch it again. We will never forget Nita and all the other victims of this globalist cult, because you've woken up, you started to realize who was it that's actually been running these rogue regimes out there, where the military-industrial complex has to expend massive amounts of resources from the U.S. taxpayer to contain the threat in the region. The Iran deal overall, even American interests. Obama and the foreign policy establishment hell-bent on getting the Iran deal done patiently waited until the mullahs had successfully put down the Green Movement to begin negotiating again. Time and again, when Obama's rotten administration had a chance to send a strong message to Iran's leaders, they dissembled and bumbled and fumbled around in epic displays of weakness and subservience in an attempt to not offend the mullahs, even when U.S. Navy sailors were seized and held hostage. And when I wrote this, I've done a lot more waking up since I wrote this. What you come to understand when you know the truth about Obama and where he came from, where Valerie Jarrett came from, and where Peter Strzok and Lisa Page came from. And you come to understand who actually runs Iran, and has run it since the 50s. Yeah, they ran it when the Shah was there. You come to understand who actually runs Iran, you understand Obama delighted in playing the role of the weak American president, so the Muslim Brotherhood affiliates and the globalist cult affiliates out there could flex their muscles. He delighted in doing that. Watching the incredible lengths to which the globalist foreign policy establishment went to get that Iran deal exposed a lot of people involved in that sort of affair. Trump promptly scrapped the deal and taken office in 2017, and of course, Biden threw the doors wide open again after that stone 2020 election and invited the entire globalist foreign policy establishment back into the White House, where they're all quickly set about proudly and arrogantly reinstituting the Iran deal. Biden also sent a very strong message to Iran by snidely informing the American public on the anniversary of 9/11, no less, that he was unlocking $6 billion in frozen Iranian assets held in South Korea as part of a ransom payment for hostages. That was a strong message, all right. And I think it was a very strong message to outlaw regimes like Iran that they should really start thinking about grabbing more Americans, holding them hostage. But that's probably just me. So it should be pretty clear at this point to any rational and disinterested observer that Joe Biden is hell bent on pursuing the very same kind of foreign policy that made the Obama administration such a rolling train wreck. Anyway, that's enough highlights on Iran. On to Egypt. Bouncing Mubarak for a Muslim Brotherhood terrorist. This is a picture of former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi. Now, be honest now, how many of you even remember this asshole? The irony of Obama having given that speech in Cairo that supposedly triggered the Arab Spring in 2009 is not lost on any astute foreign policy observer with a long memory. And by long memory, I am meaning one capable of recalling international events that occurred further back than the news cycle of the last year. New countries in the Middle East suffered as much fallout from Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's incredibly stupid foreign policy moves than Egypt. And remember, back when I wrote this, I'm still kind of struggling to understand that was this really stupid or were they doing all of this on purpose? Were they intentionally destabilizing everything? Yes. Yes, they were. The full extent of the massive bloodbath unleashed in Egypt by the Obama administration is currently not known. Just as the full extent of the loss of life they caused in Libya is also unknown, as there are no fully reliable reporting mechanisms there. People make guesstimates, but we'll never really know because it got that bad. Obama refused to aid the Green Revolution in Iran while simultaneously managing to topple Mubarak of Egypt and actively helping to replace him with an actual member of the terrorist group, the Muslim Brotherhood. Mohammed Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood government then proceeded to unleash a bloody wave of terror over that country that led to the first crucifixions of Christians since the first century. The terror and the chaos was so over the top, it was unsustainable. And the Egyptian people turned on the Morsi government and the Muslim Brotherhood. So Morsi's presidency lasted about a year, from June of 2012 to July of 2013. But the massive damage it inflicted on the country in its brief existence was truly amazing. The fallout from Obama's abandonment of Hosni Mubarak, as he allowed him to be toppled, and then helping the election of Morsi to the Egyptian presidency, continues to be felt in that country to this day. Thousands of Muslim Brotherhood members were sentenced to prison. Hundreds were sentenced to death, with those death sentences being upheld and some of them carried out. Death sentences were still being handed down by Egyptian courts to Muslim Brotherhood members as recently as 2021, and there have been more since then. Not just sentences, they've actually executed more Muslim Brotherhood members since 2021. Now, Mubarak may not have been a nice guy in many ways, but at least he didn't unleash a bloody wave of terror on his own country, as Morsi quickly did. Watching what Obama did by giving Mubarak a very public vote of no confidence and then giving him a firm shove reminded many foreign policy observers of how back in 1978, U.S. President Jimmy Carter made a similarly massive mistake in withdrawing support from the Shah of Iran because he too was not a nice enough guy. And so the not nice guy ended up being replaced by someone only about 1,000 times worse, the fanatical death to America. mothers of Tehran. This is how the public story goes. This is how it's framed for you. And yeah, I mean, heck of a trade there, Jimmy, if you buy the public story, that the CIA hasn't been running around since the 1950s. Taking out the Shah and sticking in the mullahs, that was just a change of strategy of what particular front man they were using. They were using for their policy of keeping a threat going in that region and then having to send resources to contain that threat. So once the horror show of the Morsi presidency was finally ended, and he and most of his goons ended up in prison, Morsi himself died in 2021 during a new trial before he could be executed. The global foreign policy establishment moved on to other exciting adventures in places like Libya and Syria. Killing Gaddafi, bungling Benghazi, abandoning Libya. While things were unfolding as they were in Egypt from 2011 to 2013, another country getting supposedly brilliant foreign policy nuance, thanks to the intelligence and sophisticated international machinations of Obama and his intrepid Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, was Libya. Just how badly did Obama and Clinton fuck up Libya? They're toppling Muammar Gaddafi without any real plan for what would come next. At least we're told they did this without having any plan. Remember what I've been saying. I always said it to you. This is not incompetence now. We just didn't have a plan. Okay. They are deliberately destabilizing the region and creating foundations for chaos. So Western military resources will need to be committed to contain a growing threat. That's the strategy. That's the playbook. So yeah, I admit if I was writing this column today, I would change the language here. I would not say that Obama and Clinton fucked up Libya, or I would not phrase it in a way that it could be interpreted to say Obama and Clinton accidentally destabilized the country. Okay, I would make it very clear what I was saying. They did this deliberately. They went in there and destabilized the country on purpose because doing that was the key thing that had to happen to help promote the rise of ISIS. Now, how bad did it get in Libya after that abject abandonment by the smart elitist foreign policy wonks of the Obama administration? It got so bad that human slavery openly returned. Time magazine was forced to cover this like slave markets that sprang up in Libya following Gaddafi's murder had always been there, and were not springing up only post 2013, after the U.S. gave up all pretense of managing the country. Of course, Clinton's infamous CBS interview, "We came, we saw, he died." The globalist foreign policy establishment's one wheel talent is covering its own ass after a catastrophic failure like Libya. And yeah, I mean, now that I'm reading this again, I don't want to stress this. I would write this column vastly differently if I was writing it today. Libya was not a catastrophic failure for these people. It was a stunning and absolute success. They just can't talk about how successful they were at accomplishing what they set out to do because that would ruin the cover story. It's not publicly admitted or acknowledged by the think tank wonks or the fake news media that pushes the approved globalist narrative that Hillary had to go after the embarrassments of Egypt and Libya, on top of the completely bungled response at Benghazi. Yeah, she was going to run for president in 2016, so she had to bail early to prepare for her long-awaited coronation. And this is endlessly repeated, so attention cannot be focused on the fact that her tenure as Secretary of State involved what looked like one massive blunder after another. After the events in Egypt and Libya, Obama and Hillary found themselves bogged down in Syria. It was as Syria was blowing up over Obama's stupid red line gaffe that Clinton bolted for the door and was quickly replaced by John Kerry. So I put a caption here for this picture. If your first thought on seeing both of these people together is, wow, look at all that foreign policy awesomeness contained in this one picture, you got more problems than I can help you with. No. Drawing a red line in Syria, then trying to erase it. Anybody recall the absurd media coverage as Obama tried to extricate himself from his red line blunder in Syria? Fake news spent months practically claiming Obama either hadn't said any such thing regarding the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons on its own people, or even if he had, he was being misunderstood. Nuance and sophisticated readings are vitally important if these globalist experts are to continue their important work of fucking everything up. Things got so bad, I swear I'm not making this up. Oh, Vladimir Putin himself was actually presented as riding to Obama's rescue in Syria, helping a brother. And Obama eagerly accepted the help, launching a proposal on the Western press so he could pretend that this had been his strategy all along. And of course, it soon turned out the Russians were there in Syria to help nobody but themselves. I just got to laugh looking at that picture. Regardless of what Obama may or may not have meant that day in Sweden back in September of 2013, a year later, in September 2014, U.S. troops found themselves on the ground in yet another military conflict containing a threat, taking on various other ground forces in the region, including like Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group, ISIS terrorists, and several Syrian factions fighting for the Assad regime. American troops remained on the ground in Syria until President Donald Trump abruptly announced in December of 2018 that he was withdrawing them. Actually, that's not an accurate sentence. What that should say is American troops remain on the ground in Syria, even though President Donald Trump announced in December 2018 that he wanted to withdraw them. Some of them were withdrawn, but a lot of troops stayed there. They were never taken out. So to this day, it's not all that clear what U.S. interests American forces were representing as they were on the ground there from September 2014 all the way through 2019. A small amount of U.S. forces are still there, even though Trump ordered a full withdrawal in December of 2018. Attempts by some in Congress to remove the last remaining U.S. troops in Syria continued to be voted down. This was from March 8, 2023. This is a screenshot from a AP Newswire report. House votes down bill directing removal of troops from Syria. And this was Matt Gaetz of Florida who submitted the bill. Let's get those U.S. troops out of Syria. There's no reason for them to be there. And that resolution was voted down 321 to 103. The GOP uniparty swamp runs deep. In arguing for his legislation, Gates says he didn't believe that what stands between a caliphate and not a caliphate are the 900 of Americans who have been sent to this hellscape with no definition of victory. So as of March 8, 2023, there were 900 U.S. troops still in Syria. So coming in part two, Obama's blunders with North Korea, his disappointment at Trump winning the election, and some other things. So I'm going to briefly check the chat real quick. This is a three-parter here. I want to check and see how long I've been going. I've been going for 1 hour. Yeah, it took me about 1 hour to cover the first one. Okay, the second one, it gets even better because now I covered that first one to show you where everything stood. How Obama and Clinton and Kerry literally were out there destabilizing the world. And then the threat, when Trump came down that golden escalator in 2015, Trump presented a threat. They can't have an outsider. They cannot have an outsider come in. They're good at hiding things, classifying stuff, hiding shit, yes. But it does present a lot of problems to them if an outsider manages to get in there. And they needed to prevent that. I'm going to be covering that in part 2. Let me go find that real quick. The second part. Check my archive real quick. I have an extensive archive. There's over 250 columns in there currently. And you can read them all for free, like the one I just read out to you. Okay, I'm looking for part 2. Yeah, I'll make sure I don't land on the audio. I get the actual column. Okay, here we are. Let me make sure that comes up. Trump, the warmonger versus the foreign policy wonk, the peace, part 2. Yes, there we go. Okay. I'll try to get this one done in about 20 minutes, so bear with me. I'm going to go a lot faster because there's still a part 3 to get through. And then I'm going to segue into what Trump is doing now against, with the foreign policy establishment screaming, loudly screaming to anyone that will listen to them, someone stop this guy. It took Trump just 1 year to prove how the foreign policy establishment had been selling false narratives to the public about everything. Obama was very upset during the transition period back in 2016, 2017. Did you know that? True. It should be remembered that all through the transition period from November 8, 2016 to January 20, 2017, same people who loudly told the American public that electing Donald J. Trump as the nation's 45th president would be a massive and unbelievable blunder, these same people now found themselves scrambling to deal with the nightmare of an incoming Trump administration. One of the people most stridently voicing the idea that a serious mistake was unfolding was the man who was about to be forced to hand the U.S. presidential baton to Donald Trump, Barack H. Obama. And here's that picture of that famous. Most people see the handshake. I love this picture because Obama's obviously saying some stupid shit, and Trump is sitting there doing a slow burn. So I put this caption for the picture. Yeah, the American people have made a serious mistake here. I'm supposed to be making this handoff to Hillary. Trump does slow burn. Obama spent the 2.5 months of the transition period as the Trump team prepared to take power, reminding the entire world, okay, that he, as an anointed member of the political class, having gone to all the right schools and surrounded by all the right foreign policy advisors, had been unable to make any headway at all on the growing threats of ISIS in the Middle East and of a nuclear North Korea. If he, being so smart and sophisticated and nuanced in his approach to dealing with these foreign policy hot button issues, had been unable to make any successful product I gotta start over, okay. If he, being so smart and sophisticated and nuanced in his approach to dealing with these foreign policy hot button issues, had been unable to make any successful progress, what in the freaking world gave anyone the expectation that Trump, a total beginner and a neophyte with no foreign policy experience whatsoever, could possibly succeed where Obama had failed? And here's, I forget where this appeared, Our American Tragedy, maybe the Atlantic or one of those, probably the Atlantic, by David Remnick, November 9, 2016, I think 7 days after the election. 6 to 7 days. An American Tragedy. The electorate has, in its plurality, decided to live in Trump's world. And just to tweet some of that first line, I mean, this is the tone that was being set by the fake news. The election of Donald Trump to presidency is nothing less than a tragedy for the American Republic, a tragedy for the Constitution, and a triumph for the. And I had enough of that shit. I didn't screen capture any the rest of it. Okay, but this is what they were hitting the public with, right from after Trump won the election all the way through the transition. Oh, this is a tragedy. Oh, it's going to be so hard. Oh, it's going to be so terrible. Oh, my God, the world's going to blow up. Does anyone recall that the first year of the Trump administration that the entire fake news media repeated endlessly the narrative of the foreign policy establishment that people needed to take cover? Go find yourself the deepest hole you can find. You need to prepare for the absolute worst. Now that the adults were leaving the room and this alpha male dumbass was coming in, that they're going to put this swaggering alpha male dumbass in charge of American foreign policy. I know the major thing that gets endlessly rehashed was the claim that Donald Trump was a foreign agent of the Russian government due to the Steele dossier and the sound and fury that was unleashed when General Michael Flynn, Trump's incoming national security advisor, was supposedly shown in illegally leaked transcripts violating the Logan Act. Okay. Yes. I'm an expert on that too. I guess you can use that word, expert. And that's coming around the bend again. Spigett's coming back in a big way. But I'm focused in the foreign policy space right now, so let's stick with that. But the Russiagate narrative was only one of many that was being deployed against the new Trump administration at that time. There were many, many others, such as the narrative that Trump, the impulsive braggart and bully, would not be able to help himself, as he alienated and infuriated other world leaders with his non-stop boyish behavior. Here's that famous picture. Angela Merkel, Angela Hitler, leaning over the table, trying to impress Trump that he needs to stop and reverse course. Brave Japanese Prime Minister standing there with his hands folded. John Bolton looks like he's in the Twilight Zone. And right behind Trump, standing there, looking absolutely clueless, is Trudeau of Canada. But you can't see him in that picture. This was the moment. I believe this was the moment. It's the G8. I believe it's the G8. This was the exact moment it started to dawn on the globalist cult that they had failed to contain this guy. He was doing something that was so illustrative of where he was going to take things. They were stunned. I put a funny caption here. Oh, hey, look, everybody. There's Trump being a boorish asshole again. See, this is exactly what they expected. Yeah, and Bolton standing right there, a guy who is a foreign policy establishment goon to the very marrow of his bones, is in shock. You can see it on his face. He's in absolute shock right there. But one of the biggest narratives that was driven against Trump in the early days was that he would completely screw up the delicate situation that currently existed on the Korean Peninsula. Obama himself drove this narrative home. By telling the press, he warned Trump that soon after taking office, he would be forced to go to war with North Korea. The outgoing president also apparently told Trump he himself would only narrowly averted going to war with North Korea. You know, and it's obvious Obama's selling the narrative. Hey, look, man, I went to the right school. See, I have all the right advice. Trump, he's just got that asshole general friend. You know, so I'm stepping out now. And this guy who's probably a Russian agent, you know, he's coming into the White House. Obviously, he's not going to be able to fend off this nuclear war that I just barely averted myself. So he's telling this narrative to the press. So Obama had supposedly spent years trying all the different sophisticated and nuanced strategies suggested to him by his key and highly placed foreign policy advisors. He'd gotten exactly nowhere with the Kim Jong-un regime in Pyongyang. CIA puppet in the White House. CIA puppet who doesn't really run shit in North Korea. And they do a fake slap fight, see? Because the Kim Jong-un family, the Kim family in North Korea does not really run that country. Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un were puppets of the CIA. And as I sometimes affectionately dub it, the international intelligence conglomerate owned and controlled by the globalist cult. So Obama's saying, I can't get anywhere with North Korea. Yeah, he knows as a CIA asset and operative himself, Obama knows his job was not to get anywhere. You see, it was all fake. All the negotiations were fake. Real negotiations with Kim Jong-un did not begin until Trump came in. And we're going to cover this next. One of the key principles that Obama appeared to have based his North Korea policy upon was that he should give no face whatsoever to the leader of that country. If you propose a meeting, set a time and a place, and you refuse to meet with Kim personally, you order him around like a dog. You put hoops in front of him and order him to jump through those hoops in order to prove to the watching world he is subserviently obedient to you. Well, yes, our American diplomatic team will meet you at such and such a place in Switzerland. And we will be there they will be there at such and such a time. I myself, this is Obama talking, I myself will not even call you on the phone. I will not talk to you. You will deal with my underlings. If your underlings don't show up on the dot at the right place at the right time. And of course, dealing with Asian people, face is very important to them. So this was the main strategy pursued by American diplomats and successive U.S. presidential administrations since the Eisenhower era. Here's a picture of Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter about how they managed to fool the world into believing the North Koreans were actually keeping the agreed framework treaty for several years. The CIA pretended to keep the treaty in North Korea for a couple of years. Until all of a sudden, when they were ready and George W. Bush was in there, the CIA suddenly sent out the Kim family puppet to announce, oh, by the way, we never kept that nuclear treaty. We never stopped our nuclear weapons program. Yoo-hoo, we're a legitimate threat now. Send a lot of resources to the region to contain us. It's also the chief reason there was no progress in talks with North Korea for around 60 years. Even the agreed framework agreement between Bill Clinton and former President Jimmy Carter and the Korean regime turned out to be a colossal failure. Well, that's the story. Obama and the usual suspects of the foreign policy establishment and the wonks that make the rounds on the fake news slathered it on thick with the public You have made a serious and grave error here by exchanging one of ours and Hillary Clinton for a complete outsider who won't have the first freaking clue what he's doing when it comes to dealing with genuine threats like North Korea. You people have made a horrible mistake. And that brings me to my next point. Now, it's obvious, most of you know this, but it needs to be revisited in light of what's about to happen in Alaska today. Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the one to continue Obama's awesome, intelligent, and nuanced foreign policy. After 8 years of abject foreign policy failures the world over, Obama had been confident he was going to be able to hand the presidential baton off to his chosen successor, his former Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, if you read part one of the series, you've had your memory refreshed to just how badly American foreign policy was conducted from 2009 to 2013 during Clinton's tenure as Obama's first Secretary of State. And yet, thanks to the ass-covering talents of both the fake news and the foreign policy establishment, by the summer of 2016, all the bad results in Libya, Egypt, Syria, and elsewhere had all been forgotten and forgiven. Nothing that went wrong in the Middle East or North Korea or anywhere else was really Obama or Clinton's fault, you see. The framing that was given to this is they done the best they could, following the best advice given to them by the best advisors. So here's Hillary in that famous Benghazi testimony. Hillary Clinton in 2013 being forced to sit through a recounting of her disastrous Libya policy, which culminated in the Benghazi fiasco during a congressional hearing. You can see she's glumly wondering how all those crack foreign policy advisors managed to somehow steer her into disaster. See what I'm doing there? I'm constantly hammering the framing. It was an accident. They were incompetent. They had no idea what they were doing. They didn't plan right. Yada, 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 yada. Libya went exactly the way it was supposed to, because it was destabilizing that country was necessary for the rise of ISIS. Libya worked exactly as it was planned to work. And they do a dog and pony show. They bring her in, everybody yells at her, everybody plays their role, and then everybody moves on. So, with Kim voicing ever more strident nuclear threats from Pyongyang, and with ISIS continuing to gallivant around the Middle East, seizing more territory and ludicrously holding it, the narrative was driven home. This was certainly not the time to rebuff the foreign policy acumen of someone like Hillary Clinton for that of a complete outsider like Donald Trump, whose one key foreign policy advisor was the supposed far-right extremist in General Michael Flynn, who Obama had fired back in 2014. Let me skip some of this. So Flynn becomes a foreign policy advisor, very publicly becomes a foreign policy advisor for Donald Trump in 2015. He joins the Trump campaign. He joins the Trump transition team. So much to Obama's abject horror, his hand-picked successor, Hillary Clinton, who had been anointed by the globalist foreign policy establishment, managed to somehow, by some arcane act of wizardry sorcery, lose the 2016 presidential election to Donald J. Trump. And then Trump rejects Obama's advice about Michael Flynn. So on top of letting everybody know they warned Trump he could be leading the country into war with North Korea, Obama also very helpfully revealed to the news media that he strongly advised Trump to toss General Flynn ass first off of his transition team. Certainly, told Trump, you certainly don't want to make this guy your national security advisor. Obama told Trump Flynn would give him incredibly bad advice, and so it would be a very wise thing for Trump to ditch Flynn before moving into the White House. But unfortunately, Trump didn't listen to Obama, which probably upset that gay motherfucker. What it looks like when your worst nightmare comes true. But not to worry though, because Obama and his brain trust, and I think I made a mistake here. I said January 4th. I think that meeting was actually on January 5th. So that's how I'll read it. Obama and his brain trust convened a January 5th, 2017 meeting to discuss exactly how they were going to handle the incoming Trump administration and the direct threat they were facing because General Flynn was tapped to be the new NSA. I understood. If Flynn is there for any real length of time, he's going to find out a lot of the shit they've been doing, including the FISA warrants, the spying they've been doing on the Trump transition team. So I did a rather long thread about that. On X, so skip that part. The foreign policy establishment made no secret it was ferociously rooting against Donald Trump during his first year in office. The massive embarrassment of the voting public rejecting the grand dame of the globalist foreign policy establishment to put Donald Trump in the White House instead was a slight at and a direct challenge to that establishment that could not go unanswered. Unanswered it was. I can list literally hundreds of fake news stories and headlines that were run in both print and TV during the first year of Trump's presidency, which all had the same narrative. By God, we are in trouble now. Because by some nefarious twist of fate, this complete idiot is now in charge and is literally making the wrong moves on everything. Trump in Saudi Arabia. Trump's first foreign trip as the newly inaugurated president provided the fake news media with a chance to engage in an enthusiastic orgy of negative press coverage, especially concerning to all the TV foreign policy talking heads was the massive arms deal that the Trump administration was finalizing with Saudi Arabia and the 5 other members of the Gulf Cooperation Council with this key foreign trip. Trump was viciously and incessantly lampooned and mocked during this trip by a fake news media that utterly failed to grasp what it was observing. A picture of the sordid dance that will go down in history once the truth about it is fully revealed and understood. About how the house of war has become the house of peace. Of course, the foreign policy establishment, who I have affectionately dubbed the Forever Wars machine, also was not being honest about the real reasons they were stridently and loudly objecting to Trump's Saudi arms deal or his other moves in the region. Here's a picture of Trump at the Globe ceremony for the opening of the Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology. Standing next to him is Melania. Okay, and of course, the press lampooned this. I think my brother posted this one. Somebody put this up. They were mocking the Globe ceremony by putting Saruman in the picture, as if that's a palantir from Lord of the Rings. While plenty of very profitable arms dealing had gone on in that area for decades at that point, No Western power dared to sell the GCC advanced up-to-date weaponry, and especially not this much high-tech weaponry all at once. You give them just enough to be barely functional, but you certainly don't give them enough so they can handle their own regional threats and guarantee their own national security. You don't do that. All the experts were in agreement. You don't do that. GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. Look into that sometime. Thanks for all the help over the last 100 years or so, you imperialist warmongers, but we'll take it from here. Go home. And so foreign intervention and domination of the region was an unquestioned reality for about 120 years. The US and the Brits and the French and all these other Western powers just had to be there and put military bases in place and maintaining a growing regional presence and make defense contractors a shit ton of money because the nations in the area simply couldn't get any of this done on their own. They needed our help to contain the regional threats. These terrorist groups that just mysteriously sprang up, they needed our help. Now, during the Cold War, this foreign domination of the region was sold as an absolute necessity because of the USSR. That stands for United Soviet Socialist Republic, for those of you who are real into. Soviets were there and whining and dining and creating influence over vassal states like Iran. And so we were going to have to be in the region also developing our own vassal states like Iraq, which led to things like the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, where you literally had kids being sent out to march across minefields and deliberately blow themselves up to clear a path for the Iranian army. And these kids walk across the minefield wrapped in a carpet. They would wrap a carpet around themselves so that when they stepped on the mine and they blew themselves up, so bodies wouldn't be scattered over a wide area. And they were given a golden key, a gold-painted key to get into heaven. You find out who was really running Iran, who really controlled it. And I began to understand the true scope of what you're watching, how evil this cult is that we're fighting. So, the USSR shuffled off this mortal coil in 1989, while Russia was retrenching and retooling itself from 1990 to 2001. Basically because the globalist cult that had been running the USSR and managing the Cold War from behind the scenes, they managed half the Cold War from the Western powers, in Europe and the US, and they managed the other half of the Cold War from the Soviet Politburo people they had control of in that government. And so when that was overthrown and they couldn't keep the Cold War going anymore, and the amount of money they could make from forever wars and conflicts and defense contracting and all that shit started going down dramatically. They needed to come up with a new threat. This is especially while Russia was retooling and retrenching itself and escaping their control under people like Yeltsin and Putin. So there's no more USSR threat any longer, okay? So another compelling reason for the U.S. and growing foreign military excursions into that area in the Middle East was just going to have to be provided, and so they had one ready. Hence, the rise of Islamic terrorism is the key reason we should not only stay in the Middle East, but they're continually expanding our presence there. When you research into who formed Al Qaeda and who armed and directed it in its early days before supposedly losing control of it, you discover the CIA and other foreign intelligence agencies were responsible. It continues to be a huge joke how so carefully people are not to describe Charlie Wilson as being a big CIA asset, Congressman Charlie Wilson. But that's exactly what he was. This is the cutout method when you use a flamboyant frontman, congressman, millionaire, whatever, to hide all the clowns in America activity going on behind him. They even made a movie, of Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts, Charlie Wilson's War. Good intentions when they started it, see. Unfortunately, it got away from them. They sell this narrative to you in movies. So think back to how much war profiteering was enabled following the 9/11 attack. For such a small investment of just a few $100 million throughout the 1980s and 1990s, setting up these various Muslim Brotherhood terrorist-related groups. How much of a return did the Forever Wars machine gain for itself from 2001 to 2020? Well, conservative estimates place just the U.S. spending, not even getting into Canada and the Brits, and these other countries, just the U.S. The spending on the war on terror is just north of $2 trillion. How much of that went right into the pockets of the foreign policy establishment at their think tanks and policy centers from their generous partners and giving them donations from the arms development and sales industry? Trump was the very first Western leader and the very first U.S. president to tell the Saudis, then the GCC, and the other nations in that region, I know what's been going on, and I'm going to put a stop to it. And then he started following through, and he showed to them he meant it. And go back, you go back and look at the welcome he got in Saudi Arabia in 2017. And look at the welcome he got this year when he went back. They know he wasn't blowing smoke. They know he wasn't bluffing. He said, I'm going to stop this. And he meant it. So the first two things Trump did to set the Forever Wars machine into an absolute rage was he announced that massive arms deal, handing the GCC top of the line weaponry instead of the usual outdated by decades junk that they usually got. And then he helped them rip the living guts out of ISIS with that new weaponry in less than 9 months. As all the usual suspects took to the airwaves and print magazines to loudly warn this was a massive mistake, Trump updated the key military forces in the region, especially the quick strike, quick reaction commando units and forces. He brought them into the 21st century with that arms deal. As was feared by certain people, this updating of the militaries of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman had enormous, immediate consequences. And the first consequence was the utter defeat and decimation of the ISIS terrorist group, which was never supposed to happen. Trump and ISIS. One of the biggest things the foreign policy establishment will never forgive Trump for doing was the ease with which he and the U.S. military and assisting the Gulf Cooperation Council commando forces utterly wiped out ISIS in just a few months back in 2017. They'll never forgive the man for doing that. So after 4 more years of Obama's Helpless Act, the Helpless Act that, remember, Hillary Clinton was supposed to continue, the sudden destruction of ISIS under Trump was a market contrast that could not be ignored, and it wasn't. ISIS was supposed to be a generational threat. It was supposed to continue expanding its reach and its bloody influence. After all, the people who carefully created and enabled Al Qaeda had also carefully created and enabled ISIS. There was a lot of money to be made. I think of how many trillions of dollars they got from Al Qaeda, from just that 9/11, the invasion of Afghanistan, and the invasion and occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. How they all made money on that. It was fantastic. They made trillions. But by around 2008 or 2009, it's just so Al Qaeda, because not everybody in the military is in on this. I want to be clear. Not a lot of people that are in our intelligence agencies are not bad people. They're not evil. They're not cult members. A lot of people in our military are not cult members. All right. Al Qaeda was degraded to the point by 2009, 2010. They began moving to launch ISIS, or ISIL, to be more accurate, so they could keep the money flowing. They needed a new threat, and the threat had to be sufficient to justify the sending of the resources, you see. So they were expecting at least a very profitable decade, maybe even two, in return for their ISIS investment. Why imagine the increases in U.S. military presence in the Middle East that would be necessary to contain the ISIS threat along with that of Iran? There was a lot of money to be made. I want you to see that. They've lost them both now. You understand? They lost the ISIS threat, and they've lost the Iran threat. I mean, if you understand what Trump did with that Iran thing 2 months ago, I mean, a lot of people still have not figured this out. They still let the fake news frame everything for them. They never in a million years wanted him to follow that plan where you actually drop a freaking buku buster on those sites and absolutely freaking destroy them for years and years. They did not want him to get rid of the threat. They want him to lead a freaking ground invasion. They wanted a new occupation. They want the liberation, the old-fashioned way that you liberate a country. You mass your forces on its border, and then you go in and you attack with your Air Force. You send in the tanks and you hold it and you occupy it, and you topple the government that's there currently, and then you install a puppet regime. Exactly the same shit we've been doing since the end of World War II. They wanted Trump to follow that script, and he said, not doing that. And then he surprised them. And I love the fact they couldn't complain about what he did. They had to be careful what they said. And when I found out, oh shit, he destroyed it. He destroyed Ford out. Destroyed all these. And they had to stand there with these frozen tight smiles on their face. Thank you for doing that, you motherfucker, you son of a bitch, you prick. Thank you for removing that generational threat of Iran nuclear capability. Now how the fuck are we gonna make all our money in the region? You've gotten rid of ISIS and Iran. What the That's it, man. Game over, man. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do? Where's the pretty deep shit now, man? That's a beautiful thing. So, Obama already managed to get U.S. troops on the ground in combat in Syria back in 2014, supposedly to combat ISIS, while teaching the Bashir Assad regime a lesson for using those chemical weapons on their own people. supposedly. That was a nice start, and the forever war machine was truly looking forward to expanding the U.S. military's role in Syria under the mistress of disaster, Hillary Clinton, as well as more deeply embedding the U.S. military presence in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then that son of a bitch, Donald Trump, just had to go and ruin everything for these people, totally exposing Obama's helpless act for what it was. All right. After watching the speed with which U.S. forces under the command of Donald Trump destroyed ISIS while working in support of DCC commander units, the question of just how hard Obama had really been trying could not be avoided. Here's an investor business study. I'm not going to read that part, but just say, basically they're saying, Obama was saying, this is hard, this will be a generational fight, this will take years, it's very tough. Trump says, hey, I call my generals in on day one, give me a 30-day plan, we're going there to destroy ISIS quickly. And then he did. I had to notice that. Trump said, we'll do this quickly, and they did do it quickly. And so the media was forced to kind of look at that. Yeah, why? How come Obama couldn't get anywhere? How come nobody ever bombed ISIS back to the Stone Age with an Air Force while Obama was president? That's very weird. And so I'm gonna skip this part about Jade Helm. How the GCC commandos were after training with U.S. units right under Obama's nose, because, like I said, not everybody in the U.S. military is a bad guy, is a member of the cult. They are patriots in our military, patriots who are part of the Sovereign Alliance. And they were training the GCC commandos on U.S. soil in the American Southwest, learning how to go in and seize underground facilities. And Alex Jones was over saying, oh my God, black helicopters, they're getting ready to come in and, these are all the guys. So let's skip down to this part. Trump quickly and decisively removing the generational threat of ISIS, and just like he did 2 months ago, he removed the generational threat of a nuclear Iran. Trump doing that has caused immense problems for the war profiteers of the world. How can they keep destabilizing the Middle East if Trump destroys their pet terrorist groups in short order? They keep sending on, you know what ISIS was. I've talked about this many times. ISIS was a first world paramilitary force. They sold you the cover story. It was a group of radicalized Islamic terrorists. Yep, they were hastily thrown together, a group of religious fanatics and zealots running up and down these roads and these cars and trucks and SUVs. That's not what it was. ISIS was a first world trained, equipped, highly lethal, highly mobile CIA, international intelligence conglomerate, paramilitary force, disguised as a terrorist group. One wing or head of the Hydra starts the fires. Oh, look, there's a threat over here. And as the international military industrial complex says, well, my goodness, we better take all of our hundreds of billions of dollars of resources and send them to that area and start trying to put that fire out. And you know what? The fire never gets put out. At best, we spend, $200 billion a year in foreign aid and we can just contain it, so we have to stay here forever to contain this. And people are taught to accept this. They're taught to buy into this. You grow up hearing this and being programmed to believe it. So how can they keep destabilized in the Middle East if Trump destroys their pet disguised terrorist groups in short order? Not to mention arming the militaries of the region with advanced weaponry in sufficient numbers and quality that guarantees they can keep their own security, thereby robbing the forever wars machine and the foreign policy establishment of an excuse to keep expanding foreign military presence in the area. I mean, that's funny when I say that. You know, I'm quoting Hudson from Aliens. Oh, that's just great. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do? I mean, they made so much money off of this playbook for so long. Trump is literally destroying their playbook. So, the last thing the forever wars machine wanted to see was an outbreak of permanent peace and stability in that region of the world, with fully equipped militaries quite capable of dealing with their own regional problems, which often turned out to be problems being summoned into existence by foreign intelligence agencies with nefarious agendas. You know, they love Trump because the good people in the region have no illusions where all the threats in their region are coming from, who's creating them, who's funding them, who's telling them who go here and kill these people, launch a terrorist attack, like the recent India-Pakistan thing. Take one of our sheep-dipped first-world paramilitary CIA forces and send them from Pakistan across the border into India and kill some people. They've been doing this for decades. So we can go in there and contain the threat and kickstart a new round of war profiteering. While Trump was in the process of defanging ISIS, he was also engaged in solving another Gordian knot problem that Obama and all his crack foreign policy advisors had been assuring the public was impossible. And that is getting Kim Jong-un to calm down. Getting the CIA puppet to calm down. Trump and North Korea. So the very first thing Trump did in dealing with the North Korea issue and Kim Jong-un set the globalist foreign policy establishment into red-faced conniptions. He ditched the 60 years long policy of treating the North Korean leader like a pariah by actually engaging with Kim personally and offering to meet with him in person. It was stunning to contemplate this. No other U.S. president personally reached out and offered to talk directly with the Kim family on the phone, certainly not in person. Trump offered to do both right off the bat on being inaugurated. So there was a brief period of the usual tough talk. You know, I remember that when, you know, Kim Jong-un's making the usual threats, or the people behind Kim Jong-un are making the usual nuclear threats. And Trump said, well, listen up, little rocket man. I have a button on my desk, too. My button works. So they had to, you know, do this thing behind the scenes where the strings were being cut and a massive rock from God was dropped on a mountain in North Korea and killed a bunch of people that were in that nuclear testing facility. And strings were cut when Mueller was dropped on a supposed Taliban terrorist camp in Afghanistan, blew up a bunch of people who may or may not have been Pakistani ISI. Let me put it this way. Our last string cutting went on 2017 to 2019. Our last string cutting. So there was tough talk between Trump and Kim. They established their respect for one another before Trump made kind of offer to meet and discuss the important issues with Kim that was never supposed to be done. The entire time Trump was talking with Kim on the phone, setting up that face-to-face meeting in Singapore, then Vietnam, and then North Korea itself. The entire foreign policy establishment was shrieking for him to stop, that this was exactly the wrong way to try to calm down the situation. It's almost as if 60 years of non-engagement with North Korean leaders controlled by the foreign policy establishment have been deliberately crafted to fail. Saving face. Trump was the first to offer to negotiate with Kim in a manner that allowed Kim to have or save face. Face is an Asian reality that is a radically misunderstood concept in the West, but it's vitally important to understand it if you want to get anywhere with an Asian leader. You cannot approach this person as if he is your dog. You give him a take it and leave it. Or such as, I'm willing to meet with your representatives here at this location at this time. I will not be coming myself. You're not important enough for me to deal with personally. This is non-negotiable. Take it or leave it. This is how negotiations have been done with North Korea for 60 years. And this is not approaching the Asian person or leader as an equal, allowing them to have face. Now, for all its vaunted foreign culture acumen, when we understand these foreign cultures, we study them. That's why we're experts in them. But the foreign policy establishment had been making it a foundation stone for any dealing with North Korea's leaders that they were only to be approached in a manner that gave them no face whatsoever, that they be treated as inferiors to Western negotiators. It seems, now looking back, that seems clearly designed to ensure that no results were ever achieved, and none ever were, while that kind of policy was being pursued. So the first person to break the stalemate was Trump, who rejected all the sage advice being offered to him by all the usual foreign policy experts who shouted he was making a major mistake by offering to talk to Kim personally. So here is a series of pictures. This is Trump at that initial face-to-face with Kim in Singapore, and then in the Republic of Vietnam. And then this picture is taken, of course, at the DMZ. Trump is standing on the South Korean side, and Kim is on the North Korean side. And just moments after this picture was taken, Trump stepped over the line into North Korea. So Trump had Kim engaging in real dialogue and making real concessions. It's painful at this point to contemplate where U.S. North Korean relations would be right now if the entire foreign policy, intelligence agency, fake news establishments hadn't conspired to steal the 2020 election from Trump and drive him from office. So old, slow Joe Biden could take over. And of course, the moment he was sworn in following that fraudulent 2020 election, one of the first things Biden did was go right back to the same kind of no-face policy towards North Korea that hadn't achieved any gains at all in 60 years prior to Donald Trump. The foreign policy establishment burbles and coos about how awesome it is. That means Trump is gone now. Can't muck up anything further for them. That nice and decent and demented Joe Biden will do anything they advise him to do. If you look all around the world today and contrast the current state of things with the day Donald Trump waved and climbed aboard that helicopter to leave the White House in 2017, ask yourself how Biden, listening to these forever wars machines advisors, is working out for the rest of us. And when it comes to the column reading, I'm gonna stop there. Yeah, I must have been insane thinking I was gonna cover all three of these things um, in one go. I see now that I've been going for 2 hours exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna stop right here. But on Monday, remember the schedule on that schedule I'm on right now is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I will do a 2 hour live stream, about 2 hours, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll be here on Monday, and I will go over that third part. And let me show it to you real quick before I sign off. The I can't get the archive, can I? No, okay. I gotta go back there and manually type it in. I was still with a way just to go straight to it. But part three, I will be reading on Monday at 10 a.m. I think this is it, October 31st. Yeah. And this was this. I wrote those first two columns to get to this one because I really wanted Trump to win that election. And one of the biggest areas where they were getting people to question, especially in the GOP side, question if Trump should be let back in the White House. They kept hammering on foreign policy, hammering him on the foreign policy thing. So I wrote this column right here, which we'll get into on Monday. You know, at the time I wrote this, they were saying any of these people, any one of them, do a better job than Trump. You know, and the fake news, the fake news, the liberal fake news, neocon fake news, it's funded by the same people. Uh, we're crossing land and sea to try to get people to turn on Trump to say, well, you know, we can't trust Trump to run anything. Um, now that he's back, and I'll be talking about this more on Monday. After I read that third column and get up to date, we'll talk about how this meeting today is going on with Trump and Putin in Alaska and why. Literally, even the neocon news now, even the people still watching Fox News, these people following a lot of these neocon social media influencers who, you know, gallivanted into our MAGA space, our America First space over the last 8 years or so, and they're still here. Subtly trying to frame things for you that Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe Trump didn't listen to somebody here from the old foreign policy establishment and listen. Trump is an outsider. He's always going to be an outsider. He's never going to listen to trilateral people. He's never going to listen to Council on Foreign Relations experts. He's never going to do that. He doesn't do it in the financial space. Remember, just back in February, March into April, when he said, "Yeah, I'm going to do a massive trade rebalancing, massive trade tariff reset." What are the longtime financial expert establishment? What they do when he rolled that out? What they do? They lost their minds. Somebody stop this lunatic. The entrenched establishment or anything, military, defense, foreign policy, finances, banking, they're all owned, they're all controlled. He is a threat to all of them. All of them. Because he doesn't listen to them. Why? Because he spent 50 years learning what they were actually doing and coming up with a way to stop them and reverse them and make this a free and independent and sovereign nation and lead it into a golden age. And he is doing it, and what an amazing time to be alive. Thank you for making me part of your Friday morning and afternoon. God bless each and every one of you. I will see you again on Monday morning at 10 a.m.